Oh, what a year. What a year. First of all, I want to say thank you. So, thank you. "2022 has been a massive and exciting year for present history. We have grown in following, in views, and in scope. We have produced 41 videos, 26 podcast episodes, released 4 blog posts, and set up a TikTok account that now stands at almost 2,000 followers. We started 2 new series of shorts, How Accurate Is It? And Facts and Figures. The goal with How Accurate Is It? Was to take films and TV shows and evaluate their historical accuracy. We are aware that there is a limit to how accurate a dramatic portrayal of a historical figure can be, but to pander to the desires of culture and society and media at the expense of accuracy is painful and oftentimes unnecessary. As such, we wanted to create content that provides the audience with a source of accuracy, so that you guys could discern for yourselves just how accurate these portrayals were. This film is so bad. It's so inaccurate, it's painful. And so it gets a rather emphatic 1 out of 10 from me. With Facts and Figures, we wanted to present short-form, engaging hits of factual information, something the audience could digest in a minute or a minute and a half, and have in their back pocket to whip out in conversation or impress your family members over dinner. We started Facts and Figures with information about Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee. May she rest in peace. We wanted to bring the weight of history to bear on this monumental occasion and give you guys some handy information about it to help you grow in understanding of just how impressive this queen was. Not only that she had reached 70 years on the throne, but also all that she had achieved in those years. We also used this format for our Hitler's Kingdom Come multimedia project. More on that in a minute. And managed to insert useful information about Regulation 18B or British fascist groups into the structure. We also continued our out and about shorts, making some really cool content at Chawton, the town of Jane Austen, Lizard Point in Cornwall, where the Spanish Armada was first sighted, and even Kingdom House, the headquarters of the British Hitler cult, to name just a few. Our shorts have been great fun to create, so stay tuned for plenty more next year. While continuing with the flagship Present History podcast, we launched Dark Britain, a historical true crime podcast. This is Dark Britain, the podcast that looks back on and tells the stories of the darker parts of Britain's history. I'm Zachary Peatling, and I'm here with
Chloe Storer.
And we are both graduates of Royal Holloway, University of London. And we actually met recently at a public history workshop. And this is kind of where the idea for the podcast was birthed. We're both very interested in history, obviously, because we're both history graduates, but also in true crime in general. And so we thought, what's better than mixing the two and having a historical true crime podcast? We thought that there was this awesome little niche that we could hit. Historical true crime. Most of the time, true crime tends to stop at the 60s or 70s, with the exception of Jack the Ripper. Everyone has a fascination with Jack the Ripper. What we wanted to do is go through all of British history and take out those moments that are the darkest, creepiest, scariest moments in our history. Starting with the iconic Jack the Ripper, we went through stories of Georgian sex work, a man who was once voted the most evil man in English history, and a British cult that worshipped Hitler. We have some exciting things in the works for next year as well, so stay tuned. When listening to the podcasts, you might have noticed that we now have an advert neatly slotted in. We're taking a quick break from this episode to talk to you about CAD Clothing. Most of the time, history-themed hoodies and t-shirts are garish, childish, cheesy, in your face, and most of the time, frankly, unwearable. But CAD Clothing creates subversive, subtle, and stylish history-themed clothing that you can wear and not feel embarrassed about. They also use 100% organic, sustainable, and environmentally friendly cotton in all their items so that it's good for the planet as well. CAD Clothing had a strong start this year with a number of designs being released, with some new waves planned for next year, so keep your eyes peeled for those. If you want to check out the full range, you can head to presenthistory.co.uk, press shop in the menu and check it out. We released our first ever mini documentary this year at Waverley Abbey, the first ever Cistercian abbey in England. It was set up in 1128 by William Gifford, the then Bishop of Winchester, and the original abbots and monks were actually shipped in from Normandy. This was a format that we wanted to test out, dipping our toes into traditional documentary filmmaking, and we have some plans to continue this style over next year as well, and that's going to be pretty exciting. When British forces exited Afghanistan, we thought that it would be a pertinent time to make some content helping people to better understand the history of this moment. If our strapline is looking back at the past to see how it affects us today and how it can help us build a better future, then we really should be creating content that speaks to moments like these. Events that are so momentous. We were leaving a war that had been raging for as long as I'd been alive. And so it's important for us all to understand how we got to that point. And so we created our first ever video essay, our Present History Explainer, on the history of Britain in Afghanistan. There is a reason Afghanistan became known as the graveyard of empires.
A huge explosion now raining debris.
Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were named as the most prominent suspects and perpetrators. Operation Enduring Freedom had begun. We plan on making a lot more responsive content next year, with whatever crazy stuff is around the corner. One of the biggest things we did this year was the Hitler's Kingdom Come multimedia project. When you think of Nazis and religious cults, you probably think of an old Gothic castle in the deepest, darkest corner of Germany. You don't tend to think of England, much less leafy Surrey. But in 1943, a group of fanatical fascists and radicalized pseudo-Christians came together to worship Hitler as the second coming of Christ. They founded a church in Petworth, Surrey, where they would worship Hitler on their altar, write letters to the Archbishop of Canterbury and the chief rabbi, and pen their own version of the Bible, called the Holy Book of Adolf Hitler. They were brought up in Parliament 4 times, noticed in Soviet Moscow, and it was only after a violent raid by local mercenaries that they were finally brought to their knees. by using recently declassified MI5 files and the secret letters of its members, Present History brings you a multimedia project diving into this horrific, terrible, incredibly true story of some of the darkest parts of Britain's history. This was a project unlike any other we had ever attempted. To tell a unified narrative over multiple social media platforms was ambitious and took planning and organisation. The aim was to push the bounds of public history, to innovate the interaction between academic history and social media, to see just how far academically rich, accurate, historiographically minded content could go in the public sphere. We had the chance to visit Kingdom House, interview the daughter of one of the members, and push our podcast production to places it had never gone before. We used soundscapes. Kieran, our composer, worked on an original soundtrack for the project, and we got actors to come in and play certain speaking roles. It was a cool Sunday afternoon. The sun was piercing the clouds, and the village of River was at peace. It was almost as if there wasn't a dark shadow haunting the rooms of Kingdom House. The new inhabitants of the house hadn't exactly been met with open arms, nor had they been accepted into the local community. They were viewed as a threat, as a stain on the serenity of the village, as an abhorrent blemish on society. They were everything the war had been fought against. Britain had thought they had won the war and defeated the Nazi evil. And yet now, they found a bastion of the ideology in their own village. This was a really exciting project that reset the boundaries of what present history is capable of and lays the foundations for plenty more exciting content in the future. Thank you for coming on this journey with us. Thank you for all the support, and we cannot wait for next year, where we push once more the boundaries of what public history can do, and we see just how far present history can reach.